Hello and welcome to another special edition of Flashback to the Track. As always, we are presented by Blue Emu. Soothe tired muscles and joints with maximum strength Blue Emu. Available at all major retailers. It works fast and you won't stink. Maximum strength Blue Emu. As always, I'm your host James, but I'm flying solo from my co-host Mark. He's not here this week. But that's okay. I won't be the only person on the podcast. I'll have a special guest. In fact, he's got a really interesting name. James Roger Lee Kraft. You might know him, though, as the Monday Morning Racer.
Many folks would know me better as the Monday Morning Racer. And I love all motorsports. Understand that, but I have a niche and a particular passion for drag racing and drag racing of all levels and types. But I am there at NHRA national events. I'm in the pits. I'm connected and associated with the strutmaster.com teams, which is in Top Fuel, Funny Car, Pro Stock Motorcycle. And I also work as the PR rep for Leverage Racing and am continuing to trying to expand that portfolio because I'm passionate about these teams having greater and better exposure within the sport. And on social media, as far as a platform for me, I've kind of become the defunct NHRA YouTuber. Like no one else is really doing what I do. There's only really one NHRA guy, and that's me. It seems to be the case. And as far as the credentials, I'm there at the track. I'm there at the line. I right now have my own drag racing talk show that I have on Thursday nights, and I've had people on from Amanda Busick which is the NHRA top end reporter, to just like tonight, Justin Ashley, which is a rising phenom in NHRA Top Fuel as a rookie this year. So, yes, steeped in it. As I like to say, I'm the prop plane flying, rental car riding, drag race capturing Monday morning racer. Woo!
I mean, that was a grade A promo, my friend. I loved it.
So we're going to look at the 1995 NHRA Winternationals from Pomona Raceway, Pomona, California. It's a crown jewel event for the NHRA and a really great one for us to sink our teeth in because, well, there's a lot of cool NASCAR connections as well. I hope you all enjoy.
Yeah, it's a huge event, the Winternationals. It's steeped in history. It would be one of the big four. No matter what racing you're in, you have your crown jewel events, and this would be one of them. Now, the biggest jewel in drag racing is the U.S. Nationals, which happens in the middle of the year. But the Winter Nationals, it's definitely on the list. It's one that you want to have checked off in your career that you won the first race of the year.
Is that more so because of bragging rights going into the season just to say, hey, I won the first race? Or is it also the allure of Pomona Raceway, or as known as Auto Club Raceway in Pomona?
Right. I think it definitely is more of the stigma around the location and the place. You're in Southern California. You're in the place in which you had the very inception of drag racing, the inception of NHRA. Just down the street, you have the offices of the NHRA in Glendora. You have the NHRA Museum right there on the Fairplex grounds. And I think they want to win there because of the history. It's one of the longest running events, not the longest, but it is an event right in the backyard of the NHRA. It's very similar to running NASCAR. People don't realize Daytona will, for a long time, the offices of NASCAR, that's where they were. It wasn't Charlotte. That's really been a recent transition over time, the last decade, maybe 20 years. For the longest time, Daytona was NASCAR. And to win there, well, you won at the inception of NASCAR. Very similar for Pomona.
And three categories at this time period would compete for winter national titles in the NHRA. So you had Top Fuel, of course. These are the long tube-frame chassis, making about 5,000 horsepower at this time. They're probably making much more now.
Yeah, estimated 10 to 11,000 horsepower nowadays.
Jeez. How can you fit so much power into those blocks? Like, I mean, obviously they're tuned to basically just go from the starting line to the finish line, and that's their entire lifespan.
Right. And with what the reason it's 10 to 11,000 horsepower is it's not so much a tech leap. It's not so much a different style block. I mean, what you're about to see is very similar to today. What the advancement has been in is the delivery from the block itself to the tires. All right. The tires have got better. It's the clutch systems have got better. And it's also just the nature of what they're running, nitromethane. So nitromethane really probably should not be put in anything. And yet someone at some point said, hey, I think this will work. And they put it in a engine and it is explosive. That's what it is. It's an explosive. It's also used in the pharmaceutical world for sterilization. I believe it's used in some mining applications. It's a industrial chemical, and it basically it amplifies oxygen, from what I understand. And there's a lot of theories on it. People don't fully understand even why it does what it does. It's complicated, but for example, gasoline. The vapors can ignite gasoline. Boom, boom, bomb. Well, nitromethane, you could take an open flame to nitromethane and it wouldn't ignite. Or if it did, it would ignite very, very slowly and burn slowly. But if you took a hammer and struck it, it would explode. So when it's under pressure, and these cars are putting extreme pressure on this fuel with the superchargers and the boost and everything that's being delivered, you're able to create the power that, because the blocks are based off of, I believe it's a 421 Hemi, and much hasn't changed. They're not huge engines. You would think that they're like 1,000 cubic inches. No, they're actually less than 500. And yet they're producing now 10 to 11,000 horsepower because they have that much more boost from the supercharger going in. They have the double magnetos. They are delivering all that power from the clutch. And mainly it's because of what they're burning. The wicked, strange potion that is nitromethane.
Our second category, the only other category running nitromethane, funny car. And Lee, I mean, this is always a fan favorite category. These short wheelbase cars with their unique and odd bodies that, honestly, I feel like that's where so much technology has continued to evolve in the sport, is the aerodynamics around the body, plus the constructions of the body, making them lighter and stronger.
Right, the body. I mean, they are known as the fabulous floppers. And when you look at the history of the funny car, where it began is you had drivers, teams, they moved the axles forward underneath the body, and the car looked funny car. Now, the earliest days of funny car, it was basically like full-bodied alters. My dad was with Gene Cromer in the Moonlighter, had a A-Gas Willis, but he also had a funny car, it was a Mustang, and it would look something more similar to what would be considered a roadster today, actually. So early funny car was very strange, but now what we're looking at, funny car has been redefined and it's been refined, and you have a body, fiberglass body that pivots at the rear end on a short wheelbase car that basically looks like a high-centered front-engine dragster. That's kind of the best way I can describe it. And the cars, even at this point, they still mimic the stock body to some extent, though you're starting to see a transition and the bodies become more and more aerodynamic and more like bullets to cut through the air. And you have they're known as dump truck wings on the back to allow for downforce. But yeah, funny car, fan favorite, because you have just as much power as a top fuel dragster, but you have that short wheelbase, which makes for a eel handling race car. They're hard to drive. And well, I'm a proponent of it should be hard to drive. It should have a clutch, and take away the throttle stop. And that makes for great drag racing across the board. And it even makes for great racing, I think. Look into the world of NASCAR, give them more power and less downforce, we'll have racing better.
Yeah, because you still have to drive these cars. And I think that's the craziest thing about Funny Car is how much you have to drive the Funny Car. There's so many onboards that I've seen throughout my time with like my favorite driver, Tony Petragon, who just wheels that, especially once you go past the 1,000-foot mark. Back when they used to race quarter mile, it seemed like that point from 1,000 foot to quarter mile, that's when the car could slip out of the groove. You could just step over the center line or even end up in the wall just because of how twitchy it got kind of at the top end.
Right. It is not going straight. Everybody looks at drag racing and they're like, oh, they just go straight. No, they are not going straight. They are turning to go straight oftentimes. And definitely in Funny Car, you can search an in-car camera, just like you mentioned, and you'll find guys, they're completely doubled over trying to keep that Funny Car in the lane. And think of it this way, the cars are so powerful. And there was some controversy about this in the past recent years. The cars are so powerful that they create their own thrust out of the headers. And you had teams figuring out here recently, oh, we can angle the headers back and allow it to propel us forward. There's so much power coming out of the headers and in driving, what happens if you drop a cylinder? So you have a cylinder, it's not burning the fuel anymore, it's just pumping raw fuel through it. It's lost fire. Well, you just lost 1,500 horsepower. And you now have that much less force pushing your car this way. So now you have extra force on this side, and it's going to push you toward the wall or push you to the center line, and you're trying to counteract that with the steering wheel, and all under 4 seconds.
And that's why Jack Beckman and Ron Capps are still doing this, because they're consistently good at not only keeping that car straight, but like you said, predicting that. You have to understand that as you're driving, because I'm assuming all these drivers are flat out. I mean, there must be some pedal work there too, is there?
So they are flat out until they do have to pedal. And pedaling in the drag racing world is when you lose traction and you begin to smoke the tires, or there's tire shake, which sometimes isn't the easiest thing to see. And you do get out of the throttle, and you don't just stab it though and get back into it. You have to kind of feather. You have to kind of roll back into it, because these engines do not like you getting out of the throttle and going right back into it. You are, most of the time, that's a recipe for disaster and blowing your supercharger sky high. So yes, in the event of tire shake or the event of smoking the tires, you'll see a driver play with the throttle. Other than that, they're going to be in it all the way until they have to get out of it.
The final category that is in this current era of the Winter Nationals is Pro Stock. Now, Pro Stock is probably the closest where we're going to see to streetcar parody or the visual look of the streetcar, but it's also one of the more closely contested categories in drag racing. These cars don't run as quick as their Nitro brothers, but when they run, they are close, they're side by side, and I mean, they're wicked fast as well.
Yes, for a door car, or a door slammer, as they're also known as, they are, even at this time, it's amazing to see what a 500 cubic inch limited motor can do. And this period, too, the cars still look like their stock counterpart. You know, today there's a controversy, there's issues that they don't really look much like their stock counterpart. But at this period right now, you still have stock body lines, and we may still be in an era where you have a steel roof and you have to have a stock body line of the roof and the rear. There used to be a day and time where the NHRA was so strict on the cars appearing stock that I believe it was 1988, Bob Glidden shows up to the Winter Nationals, and there are little bumps on the rear of the car where the tires are, just to give a little extra room for the slicks. And NHRA told him that the next event, you do not need to have these bumps, these flares, because that's not stock. That's how strict they were at one point. So you have cars that are naturally aspirated, so they don't have a supercharger, they don't have a turbocharger, they don't have nitrous. It is pump gas, high octane, obviously, but it's gas, carburetors, all motor running at. No, this time we're probably looking at 670s or something, near 200 miles per hour, around that range. It's pretty impressive, frankly.
Yeah, and you talk about being precise and, with the car placement on the track, especially with funny car. In pro stock, it's essential because of how close the parity is between the two cars on the line. A race could be determined just by getting half a car length out of the groove, and that from there you lost time. It's insane. And also how minimal your movements have to be, because big things can happen in a pro stock car when they get sideways.
They're very challenging to drive. Most people will look at pro stock and say, oh, they are just going straight. Well, you want to go as straight as possible. What's the shortest distance to any point? Straight line. So if you're moving around, well, you just didn't go 1320. You actually went 1340 or something. You increased how far you went within that measured distance. So you want to go as straight as possible. And yes, these cars, when they get out of the groove, there's not much driving them back. Most of the time, the drivers just get out of them because they don't have a lot of downforce. They're shaped like bullets, even though at this time they do keep some of their stock appearance. They're wanting to cut the wind. And if they get out of shape, most time drivers get out of it. But if they drive it back in, you just went further within the quarter mile than you had to. Man, they're hard to drive. You just doing a burnout right. There is footage of Jay Leno around this time frame stepping into Mark Powick's pro stock, and Jay Leno tries to do a burnout, and Jay cannot get it. There's like 4 or 5 attempts, and Jay's a car guy. I would expect him to know how to do a burnout, but the clutch, I haven't felt it myself, but I've asked pro stock drivers, I've asked others who have felt it. The clutch wants to throw your leg off. Like you are just putting all your power and weight on that clutch to keep it from throwing your leg off. And then you're having to set your brake pressure on the line lock, and you got to have your hand on the shifter. There's so many, and then you got to bring the car up to a certain rev point. I believe it's like 4,500 to 5,000 RPMs. You got to do all of that and try to hit the tree and have a good light, because if you're late in pro stock, you're not going to win a race.
Now, for this broadcast, obviously we have to look at who presents it. This was presented by Diamond P Sports, which actually was their video distribution, I believe, was based out of St. Petersburg, Florida, close to where I live. I think like right down the street from me. So, but this was on a series called
American Sports Cavalcade,
which was interesting because it was basically just sold off to the Nashville network, but it wasn't the Nashville network. It was its own kind of sports thing. Do you remember watching this broadcast initially in 1995?
I do not remember this broadcast. Now, the broadcast for me as a kid in drag racing, I distinctly remember is the Winter National event in which Kenny Bernstein had his top fuel crash, and he actually goes over the wall. And, I remember that. And he's being interviewed by Steve Evans, and he says to Steve, yeah, it's like hitting the wall in a NASCAR, because a lot of people don't know it, but Kenny Bernstein at one time owned his funny car or Top Fueler, which period he owned a NASCAR and he owned an Indy car. And Kenny Bernstein wrecked his own stock car one time in a test at Atlanta, and he totally destroyed the car. Totally destroyed it. Go find some photos. It is wrecked. And the wreck was so bad, he actually referenced that wreck. But that's not this year. So, no, I don't remember this broadcast in particular, but I will say this. I wish more modern broadcast companies would look at the formula that TNN had, because that era with NASCAR and drag racing and like actual monster truck racing, I remember that as a kid. They actually raced.
Yeah.
Man, TNN was rocking it at that period. I loved me some Ned Jarrett and Benny Parsons and Steve Evans. And look, we got Ralph Shaheen in this broadcast, if I remember correctly. Man, Ralph just Like, folks, look, if you want to read about sports, motorsports across the board, get Speed Sport, which he's like the head editor or owner of. I can't remember now, but I mean, this man loves motorsports. I remember him TNN ASA. They used to cover ASA. Oh, TNN was the bomb. And the Diamond P connection with Steve Evans and TNN is just, I don't know, it's epic. Steve Evans is the man. He is the drag racing legend when it comes to talking and interviewing. He was the guy.
Yeah, because I even remember him on the ESPN broadcast. So I feel like he was just that guy who everyone knew and trusted. So the paddock and the community wanted to have him be around. He was just the person within the industry.
Definitely. He definitely was. I had an opportunity to interview Amanda Busick, who is the current top end reporter for NHRA, also a pit reporter. And I asked her, I said, you're filling some awful large shoes in Steve Evans, and he set the bar very high. Do you feel that every time you go to the top end and you're prepared to interview drivers? And she said, well, I definitely feel that pressure, and there's no way I will ever reach that bar. So even amongst his peers and others in the industry now, many years now after his death, decades nearing, people recognize him as that guy.
Now, the top stories in this event, we'll break it down through category. First, we'll start with Funny Car. With Funny Car, Dean Scuzza, drummer Dean Scuzza. He's an independent, I believe, at this point, kind of early on in his career. Now, he was the fourth fastest qualifier, but in round one, he became the fastest man in the Funny Car field by sledding the lowest ET with his first pass. That's saying something right there.
Man, I was a Dean Scuzza fan. This guy, and yes, right now he is just coming in, and there's transitioning happening. He's really kind of the new kid on the block in the Nitro Funny Car ranks. And Dean was great. I mean, he would interact with Force, and there was rivalry there later on. And not to mention, he would do long, smoky burnouts. I can remember being at the Southern Nationals when I was a kid, and man, when I was hoping Dean Scuzza and John Force would line up, and there'd be this long half-track burnout. I mean, it was a great show then. It definitely was a great show. So yeah, Dean. Man, I wish he was still out there today. I got to do that. That's something I need to do. I need to do where are they now? And Dean needs to be a part of it for sure.
Now, Top Fuel, we talk about a youngster. How about a guy making his first ever NHRA Top Fuel start? Larry Dixon Jr. That's a name we all know, very synonymous with Don the Snake Perdone. Well, he's actually making his debut in the Snakes Miller Genuine Draft Car. He's had a very interesting month or so. We spoke about this earlier, Lee, testing that the Nitro cars would do back in Bakersfield, basically about a month before this event, because everybody wants to, make sure they got all the cobwebs worked out and everything's working fine before they go into the first event, being a crown jewel. And Larry had a bit of an incident. He had a practice crash, and it was a pretty violent one.
It was bad. There's only one camera angle that I know of this particular incident at the top end, and it's the one, I believe they even show it in this particular broadcast. It's violent. It is bad. He basically has a blowover. It goes end over end, rolls and tumbles, and yeah, it's a bad crash. And it amazes me. Here is this rookie. He's had this terrible crash, and it meant nothing. I mean, it was testing. And he's getting in the car and he's going out and performing at the Winternationals. And wow, I mean, what to think that he really kicks off his career with a practice crash and yet has his career wind up. And I don't think it's done. There are some rumblings that he may be back in 2021 because the license issue has apparently been worked out with the NHRA that he was having. But yeah, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. Definitely Hall of Famer, one of the greatest top fuel drivers ever. That's Larry Dixon for sure.
Now in the pro stock category, we have an interesting face, Rusty Glidden. Now he's the son of Bob Glidden. Explain, Bob, his statistics and his career in pro stock.
Oh, wow. Bob Glidden. I mean, arguably the greatest pro stock driver of all time. I mean, GOAT status for sure. And Bob, I believe it's 10 NHRA Pro Stock Championships spanning from like the late 70s into the late 80s. He battled against some of the greatest names in the sport ever in Lee Shepard, Butch Leal, Bruce Allen, Warren Johnson, Frank Iaconia. He battled against these guys and just always seemed to have an edge. He did it in a Ford when no one else was doing it in a Ford. You had that stigma to it. I think he's got like 9 U.S. national wins, and U.S. Nationals is the biggest race of the year. It's the Super Bowl for drag racers. I mean, it's known as Bob Glidden Way now. It's just GOAT, 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 no matter what the category. I mean, he is the man. And yeah, here he is having some issues, some health issues, as they'll explain in the broadcast. And his son, Rusty, instead of Billy, which is interesting. Billy is far more well known for his drag racing career in his black Fox body Mustang and in some pro mod endeavors, but it's Rusty in the car. This is one of the few times you hear Rusty being in the car. It's strange, frankly.
Well, the choice was made. They put Rusty in the car. And, it's interesting with this broadcast, they started with the second round. So at this point, Rusty Glidden actually gets a round win, and he's in round 2. So he could be a player, a surprising player in the pro stock category, because he's got one fast Ford Probe he's driving. That's a very unique car, Ford Probe. I don't think it really lasted that long.
No, it didn't. I think it had a 5, 6, maybe 7 year span. It wasn't that popular. They're cool to see though. When you do see them, they're rare now, but when you do see them, like, oh wow, because I think they were a car that probably was a bit ahead of its time. If you look at a Probe now, you can see some modern things, but no, it bit the dust. It had some quality issues, which all the big three were having quality issues at the time, and well, the Probe was one of them.
The biggest elephant in the room, though, if we're going to talk about news in the 1995 NHRA drag racing season, was McDonald's entry with Joe Gibbs Racing, the Team McDonald's super team that basically stretched across all 3 categories. What did this mean at this point in the NHRA to have a guy like Joe Gibbs, who had Super Bowl rings? And at this point, he only had the victory at the Daytona 500, I believe. And now he's starting an NHRA top fuel team and a funny car team. And then he's associated with the Jim Yates Pro Stock team, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Yes. So he is functioning in the 3 top pro categories, minus Pro Stock Motorcycle, but they're not at this particular event. They have a different schedule. So yeah, Coach Joe Gibbs comes in, and I really think Gibbs coming into the sport began the spark, or began the tiny snowball that would snowball and become what we have with John Force Racing and Don Schumacher Racing and KB Racing and Elite Motorsports today. I think he established the model. I really wish Joe was still in drag racing even to this day. I mean, there's a roundabout, through these people connections. Jason Line used to work in the engine shop that Joe Gibbs Racing on the NASCAR side. Well, he's actually retiring this year from pro stock and has had a great pro stock career, many wins, championships, and in the tuning efforts, and will still be putting in tuning efforts in the future. But yeah, I think Gibbs established a new business model in the NHRA. Now, it's noteworthy that he left, because when you really start diving into the world of NHRA drag racing, it is not a sustainable business model. It is crazy, stupid money, what they're doing run by run, especially in Nitro right now. If you're going to compete at the highest levels, you basically know you're going to hurt engines. You basically know you're going to hurt parts to run the fastest times. You're just going to blow money, quite literally. And for whatever reason, drag racing has been like the redheaded stepchild of motorsports. You've seen NASCAR lead the way. You've seen IndyCar lead the way. And drag racing is always a step or 2 behind. And I think that's something Gibbs probably noticed. But nonetheless, I think he establishes the idea that multiple teams in multiple classes can be done just like John Force and Don Schumacher are doing today. With what you see Joe establish, you find it easier today to see crew chiefs under an umbrella going to car, or even the co-crew chief type of scenario happening. That's very common today. You know, for example, Antron Brown, you have Mark Oswald and Brian Karate, and they are legendary. Well, you know, Mark's a legendary driver. I'm not sure if he's in the field in this one or not, but he's even still drag racing at this point. But now he's tuning on a car. He's got Brian Karate, legendary tuner. You know, you have several scenarios where you have co-crew chiefs. In fact, you know, Cruz Petragon actually lost a crew chief this week. Eric Lane was struck in a small town in Texas that the team was hanging out. He's struck by a vehicle, but he's co-crew chief with Nick Costello, I believe is his last name. So you have this scenario happening. I think you really see that happening with Gibbs and this model that he creates of really super teams. Because later on, you see Don Schumacher, though it's not now. Don Schumacher at one time, I mean, it was Top Fuel, it was Funny Car, there was a Pro Stock, and there was even some dabbling into the Pro Stock motorcycle world. You have that, and Gibbs, when I look at the history of drag racing, he's really kind of the first guy to do that. You had a few guys do a Top Fuel dragster and do a Funny Car, maybe not every event, but occasionally have them on the grounds at the same time. But this guy just went across the board and had every pro category represented. It was different. It was unique.
All right, now we're going to jump into the coverage. We're going to look at 3 specific drivers per category, and we're going to go through the rounds that they will go through within their venture through the ladder. Now, we're going to start in the Pro Stock category. We're going to cover Rusty Glidden first. Now, he's in the Ford Quality Care Pro. He defeated Steve Schmidt in round 1. Now he's set to go head-to-head with Scott Jeffron's Mopar-backed Avenger.
Ford did back Glidden at this time, but it did not have the ties as the Mopars had back to the factory. And we're in a time frame, too, that you see the performance of Glidden going down. We're actually near the end of his career and him stepping out of Pro Stock, except coming back in occasionally and racing. And the Glidden name, you're seeing the beginning of the end, actually, in this time frame.
The dodge in the near lane. Whoa, great lights by both drivers. Jeffron trying to keep that car as straight as he can. And he beats Rusty Glidden by a clean car length, a 712 to a 718.
Them dead even off the tree. But Jeffron in the Avenger, he's going to take the win over Glidden.
Glidden out. And again, Rusty, he's not known for his drag racing career. So this is one of the few times he is out there, and definitely it makes me want to go back and look and see how often was Rusty actually in the car and how well did he do. You know, I think many people would probably remember Billy racing against his dad and being in the Winnebago Pro Stocker and having some success. But yeah, Rusty being in and winning around, there weren't that many days.
Yeah, it's like, you know, do you calculate that as a success? You know, you at least made it out of round 1.
You do. Look, in drag racing, if you're going to have any shot at a championship, if you're going to have any shot at success, you got to start by round 1. I mean, you've got to get by round 1. Going out early it's just not good. And at this time, it's important because how does the TV coverage work? Well, it picks up at round 2. So if you want to get on TV, what do you need to do? You need to get past round 1 for sure.
Next up, we got Jim Yates. Now he's a part of this McDonald's super team. Now he's going to represent the fast food colors in the Pro Stock category. He won against Mark Osborne in round 1. Now he's going to draw Jeremy Ekman in the far lane. Ekman didn't have the best 1994 season. Could you explain Ekman's 1994 season?
Well, it's just bad. You know, Pro Stock is regularly a game of finding the extra horsepower. And if you haven't found the extra horsepower, it's going to show up on race day. And for Ekman, he's been struggling in that area in performance. You've got to have it. And wasn't driving ability, good driver, but he was getting beat by the Gliddens, getting beat by the Warrens, getting beat by the Yates. So if you don't have the performance in pro stock, it's going to show. It's going to show definitely on Sunday.
Well, this Sunday, he's looking good. He's made it to round 2, which is big. He didn't qualify into the top half of the bracket, but Ekman's there, but he's going to face Yates.
Whoa, and Ekman a little out of shape. It appeared that Ekman might have been a headlight ahead, and he loses by a headlight.
Good run off the line, but Ekman was in the hunt, and then at the 300-foot mark, it just seemed like he just lost traction. He was out of the groove, and that gives the win light to Jim Yates. He gets a free pass to go fast, basically, almost like a test run. Next up, we have Daryl Alderman. Now, he's going to be the second Avenger in the Team Mopar camp. He's going to go up against a fast Mark Pollock. Now, Mark Pollock was fast in qualifying. He qualified 4th fastest. Unfortunately for Mark, Alderman was 2nd fastest. Now, this is a good matchup because in the second round, this could be a final anywhere else with the pace these two cars have, but it's a second round matchup. And in fact, we're going to go on board with Daryl Alderman as he punches through that Lenco transmission.
Oh, what a great onboard shot. Look at Alderman pull those Lenco handles into 5th gear and in to the semifinals.
Just iconic imagery of drag racing, and probably made so because of Bob Glidden. He used to have like the only in-car. And yeah, that Lenco, boom, boom, boom. One time, I hope, I don't know if I'll ever get to, but just one time I want to pull all the levers on a Lenco. I don't care if I win or not. Just to have that experience going down the track, and I feel like I'm Bob Glidden for once. That would be great. But yeah, it's a great image of those levers lined up and the driver working in that car.
And like we said, that was a strong matchup. That could have been a final round here for the Winternationals. Unfortunately, it was round 2. And Alderman, he's going to move on, and he's going to go head-to-head with Jim Yates in the semifinals. So we had 2 drivers we were highlighting in pro stock, and we're going to come down to 1 now. We're going to eliminate 1. So who's going to get the victory here? Because the winner is going to go on to the finals.
Ooh, Yates almost goes through the lights. Did that distract Daryl? I think so. He's very late. Oh, but look at the Wayne County power.
Looks like it's all Mopar power. Alderman gets the win light over Yates. Almost went into the second set of staging lights there when he was staging up, Lee.
There is an acceptable room with the lights of playing where you're positioned in the staging process. So you're fully staged. You can go deep. You can deep stage, which is actually knocking the top bulb off. But especially in pro stock, you got to be careful about red lighting. You got to be careful about red lighting anyway, which you're disqualified from that run because you left before you were supposed to go legally. And if you deep stage shallow, you're giving yourself just a little bit of a running start, basically, before the timing system starts. Therefore, you'll actually appear to have a faster time. And if you are deeper in it, it will slow down your time because you didn't have that little bit of running start. And where this really comes into effect is, yes, the reaction time and the threat of red lighting, but whoever is the quickest in a drag race, they have the choice of lane for the next round. So if you feel like you need to go deep, you're going to hurt yourself on ET. Therefore, you might not have lane choice for the next round. And honestly, look, the NHRA does a good job. The lanes oftentimes are comparable, and there's not that much differences in them. But it's just a driver's comfort, really. Oh, I got lane choice. I can be in the lane I want to be in. And it plays into it for sure.
The finals in pro stock, it's Team Mopar. One Mopar will be claiming the 1995 Winternationals title. It's just about which one. It's going to be Scott Jeffron versus Daryl Alderman. Okay, now this is going to be a great one. It's going to be a great one because we have a staging duel at the beginning. Who's going to go into the second set of bulbs first? Jeffron? Well, he'll take his time because Alderman gets in there first, then Joe. Then the tree goes out.
Another classic final. Alderman gritting his teeth, and just enough.
Jeffron with the whole shot, but Alderman just comes around him half track, holds on, and takes the win light. It was beautiful to see that from the in-car lead, because you could just see that Scott got off the line and he was ahead for about a half car length, and then Daryl just pulls him in and just overtakes him.
Right. Man, definitely need more in-car camera in modern day NHRA. I don't know why there is such a limited view of in-car camera. I don't know why they're not doing it, but it's just impressive to see what the driver is seeing, especially in a drag race. And, the thing in drag racing, drag racers will tell you at the end, oh, I never saw them, or I did see them and I didn't know who won. And if you can see that person out there on the other side, and you're tracking down the drag strip together, it just adds the intensity of what's happening in a drag race. But this period, the Mopar boys are doing exceptional. And you have one, though, gets a lot of wins and doesn't have the consistency. And the other one has a little bit more consistency, but is the bridesmaids often. But if you want to win that championship, you got to be consistent.
Oh, and that's why Alderman was the 94 champion. And now he is the 95 Winternationals champion. It's time to go to everyone's favorite category, funny car. So the first driver we'll highlight has to be the fan favorite of funny car. Obviously, Mr. John Force. And in 1995, it's not Ford John Force. No Ford Force. It's Firebird Force, the era of John Force with Pontiac and General Motors before he rekindles that in the modern period we are today. But this is really cool to see. I always liked to see John in that Firebird. I always liked the Castrol GTX look on it.
I like looking at this era because the Firebird still looks like a Firebird. It's a strange looking body because it's a funny car, but nonetheless, it's got the front of a Firebird and it's got the rear end of a Firebird. And it's something that I think modern day funny cars definitely need to work to get back to look a little bit stock.
That's the best part, honestly. We need to really appreciate just all the funny cars in this event are so gorgeous. Not only just the body styles, but the paint schemes as well, especially who John Force has to go up against in round number 2. Gary Bulger. That's just a beautiful Pontiac. This shows the effort some teams would put in. Yeah, they don't have the big money of that sponsor, but they still show up with a really nice looking race car.
Yes, and Funny Car has been known for that for a very, very long time. And to some degree, even still to this day, little known fact, Jim Head and his Funny Cars, they are still paint. They are not wraps. They are still paint even to this day. And there's some impressive looking cars. The Creasy family right now, beautiful car. I mean, it looks like it's red, white, and blue, maybe purple, depending on how we're, from standard definition now looking at it. But it is a beautiful looking funny car. And also, folks, the Creasy family is still out there. Dale Creasy, his name is mentioned in the broadcast, if I remember correctly. He basically would be help tuning and wrenching on the car. He drives today in the Tech Pack funny car for the Creasy family racing. He's still out there, still qualifying. Matter of fact, was able to interview him and chat with him because he took out the number 1 qualifier, Tommy Johnson Jr., at the U.S. Nationals this year, if I remember correctly. So, this family has been around drag racing for a very, very long time, and they're still in it.
Well, they're going to have their workout out for them in round number 2 as they go up against the big powerhouse John Force team.
Bulger is out on Force, Ralph.
He's out with a 469 out of the box, and he's going to put Force on the trailer.
Definitely in this time, John Force has already developed a bit of that legend of being the Force. And he has already began his stellar career. Mind you, folks, that was not always the case. Man, John Force will tell you he's been on fire from Australia to Indianapolis. And he has done that, and he struggled for a long, long time in drag racing without any wins. And matter of fact, the first time he won in Montreal in 1987, Diamond P wasn't there. So it wasn't recorded and we can't see it. But definitely, yes, the Creasy family gang here with Bulger, they They get off the line. They win over John Force. John Force just looked like didn't quite have the performance in that round. You have to wonder what happened the round before. And he had some issues in qualifying at this particular event. And maybe that affected the tune that Austin Coyle was putting into the car. Definitely John Force is going to go on and win another day, but always great to see the underdog teams in drag racing. And there's many of them, even to this day, out there competing. And you never know when they might nip one from one of the big names.
No, today it was the Creasy family's day, and Gary Bulger gets the win light in round number 2. Next up, we're going to look at one of the drivers from our top stories of this event, Dean Scuzza. Scuzza is going to line up in round 2 against Chuck Etchells in that beautiful Kendall Oilback Dodge Avenger. Another beautiful looking funny car. Scuzza's as well, that bright yellow, big Scuzza on the side, just looks beautiful.
Etchells is slow out of the box, but Scuzza with lots of problems just after the starting line.
Right. Scuzza, he was a showman. He knew how to put on a good show for the crowd. He did just as long, if not longer, burnouts than John Force in this day and time. And yeah, Chuck Etchells always had that workman type mentality and attitude to him. Wasn't flashy, but you knew lining up against him, that was a quality car, and it was going to be a tough drag race. And just something about, yes, the Kendall colors of this time. They're simple. It's not flashy, but the black, the yellow, what looks like some red, some orange in there, just good-looking, funny cars. And Scuzza, with this car, it's not that well known. People don't remember him for the family car. They remember him later on for the Mopar schemes with the reds and the blues and the yellows and the blacks and the whites. But I want you to notice on the side of that car near the blower hat, kind of rolling off the fender, you have a name, Lance Larson. Lance Larson is the crew chief. Lance Larson has had a long, storied career in nitromethane drag racing. He is a champion-winning crew chief, and he's still out there today. Most recently, he was wrenching for Lex June in the Top Fuel ranks. Talked to Lance before. Very articulate, intelligent man. And here he is wrenching all the way back in 95. And he even is still out there doing it today.
But unfortunately, this is not going to be Scuzza's day. He's going to lose power at the 100-foot mark. It seemed like maybe some tire shake, but unfortunately, Etchells will pull away, and he's going to take an easy victory in round 2. Dean Scuzza is eliminated. Sorry, Dean, but you keep on rocking, buddy.
Yeah, tough run for Dean. Looks like right out of the box, it just shot toward the wall, and he tried to drive it back into the groove, but already saw that Chucky was on a stellar run and got out of it.
Well, finally, we got to pick someone that could go at least in another round. The Cruiser, Cruz Petragon. All right, now Cruz, we've highlighted. He's driving one of the McDonald's backed cars. He's going to be for Joe Gibbs Racing. This is going to be the McDonald's backed funny car. I love the iconic corporate cohesiveness.
Yeah, look at McDonald's. They've got their signature red in there, vibrant, some white, but every car's got the golden arches on it, faded in and out. I mean, yeah, they definitely have got their thing going on in drag racing.
Oh, plus that scripted McDonald's. It looks very, very nice, very of the time, modern for 1995. Now, Petragon in round number 2, he's going to go up against Gary Clapshaw, another privateer on the tour. Beautiful looking Mustang, just gorgeous. Love that root beer kind of color with the orange and the red. It's vibrant, it pops, but it also looks like it's got a lot of flake, something you can really probably appreciate more so in person than we can in this VHS quality YouTube upload. But, you know, he's been making some fast passes this weekend. He could be another one to pull off an upset, but this time could be against the Cruiser.
Right, but it's challenging in drag racing. You know, sometimes these guys will get past round 1, and, you know, one of the troubling things is not getting past round 1. You can have that happen. It's, can you make the turnaround? So just even his team making the turnaround is an accomplishment to line up for round 2. And yes, what a beautiful body. It's almost mind-boggling that people would take the time and effort to make sure their funny car looked stellar, hand-painted, metal flakes, wild colors, and you had the threat of blowing the body off or burning it down. It's absolutely amazing.
Oh, and big problems for Clapshaw. Cruz hazing the tires, fighting for traction. Gets through the lights. The chutes are still a little late coming out, but the time not as strong as he would have liked.
To your point, Clapshaw got the car turned around. His crew did a stellar job with it. But unfortunately, right after he takes off and gets to the 100-foot mark, he lights up the rear tires.
Right. And I do have to wonder, looking at the footage, I wonder if Clapshaw had an incident because there was a flash when looking at the footage. I wonder if some oil with a rod getting kicked or something actually got under his rear tires and he smoked the tires and had to get out of it. It just wasn't tire shaking because it looked like he was on a good pass. And when the clutch went to begin engaging, it looked like something went awry there in the power plant. But yeah, Cruz, there's a clip shown before this round of the chutes coming out late. The chutes come out late here again. And folks, I know many of you may watch this and you may have never been to Pomona. I've been to Pomona 2 times now, and I was absolutely shocked when I saw the shutdown area for the first time. I mean, there can be an argument made that they shouldn't even be running nitro cars at all at Pomona. It is way too short. And not to mention, once you go past the sand pit, there's nowhere to go, folks. You go over the road and you're landing in the park beyond the Fairplex. It's not like, you got, space to go off into a field. No, you're going over a public road into a park with rolling hills. It's not a soft landing. So definitely Pomona is one of those places where they had to go to 1,000 feet. It just had to happen. And you can see they're still in the 1320 era here, and Cruz is struggling to get the car stopped because it is so short. It is extremely short.
He's able to save the car because he's the cruiser. And now he's going to go into the semifinals. This time, Cruz is going to go against Al Hoffman. Now, Al Hoffman, a funny car legend for sure.
Yes, Al Hoffman, legend in the sport, serious drag racing competitor, used to campaign the Showtime Nitro Funny Car for many, many years, picks up the corporate sponsor with Western Auto and runs those colors pretty much to the end of his career. Always wanted to beat John Force. Him and John Force had a rivalry, and it was so good. They kind of played off each other and their characters. And Al Hoffman, one of the greats of drag racing, definitely.
Clutch dust in Hoffman's car. Hoffman almost hits the center line. Oh, my.
That's some good drag racing for sure. Al is fighting that car to keep it in the groove. It gets out of the groove. He brings it back in. I love the in-car shot, all the clutch dust going around Al. Spectacular to see. Cruz driving it, though, straight and true all the way to the stripe and gets there first. And, again, has issues with the parachutes and has to wheel the car afterwards.
Hopefully they get it fixed for the final. But Cruz is going into the final. Petragon will go to what was his 6th straight final, including 5 finals from 1994. This guy is consistent.
He's the only driver in the 90s to defeat John Force in a championship run. The only one. I think it was 92, if I remember correctly. He's the 92 and 2008 champion. So he was able to win a championship in almost different eras of NHRA professional drag racing, though still same car, a funny car. And many wins. Hall of Fame career. He's a Hall of Fame drag racer. And he's accomplished in the alcohol ranks. He's drove top fuel dragster. He's drove here now in funny car. Also, he's actually a rather accomplished dirt racer. He was involved in dirt racing before known as a drag racer, and he has continued to stay in drag racing. If you check out one of my videos on my channel, I did a shop tour at his facility. He's actually got a quarter midget ready to go for the Tulsa shootout as well. So he is a racer's racer. People ought to really pull for him. They think he's a jerk or an a-hole. The fact is, he's just passionate about what he's doing, and he wants to win. I don't fault a guy for that. I mean, this is the man's livelihood. He wants to win. You know, a racer that doesn't want to win, I got to ask, why do you race anyway? What's up with that?
And in this round, he's going to go up against Chuck Etchels. Hey, Chuck, we saw him earlier when we highlighted drivers. Chuck was able to make it through the ladder, and now he's going to face Petragon in the finals for the 1995 Winternationals title in the funny car category.
Oh, and sparks out of the bell housing. Clutch from Etchels. Can't even see where he's going. A mechanical failure. Petragon wins it.
Well, right from the start, we speak about clutches. How about seeing the clutch explode from the in-car of Chuck Etchels' machine? Petragon's going to light up the night sky and score the victory in the Winternationals.
Man, wow, Chuck. Yeah, right off the line, something happened in the drivetrain, the clutch. I mean, all the sparks and the dust. It's like it all fused and engaged at once and went nowhere. No telling what happened there. But Joe Gibbs has got to be just elated and excited over this moment because you can find this information out elsewhere. For example, the Dale Jr. Podcast, the Dale Jr. Download, he had a conversation with Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs started out in drag racing way back, wanted to be a drag racer because he comes out of Southern California. So before he was involved in football, he was involved in motorsports and drag racing. And for him to kind of live out a dream vicariously through Cruz Petragon, winning at Pomona in Southern California, a Southern California kid, first race, big team, big corporate sponsor. It would be great to talk to Joe Gibbs about this very moment, this very day, and living out and accomplishing a dream.
Yeah, and also being there, physically being able to witness this accomplishment. You know, a lot of these successes might happen and, he might be somewhere else and he has to just, accept the fact that it happened. But he's there in the moment to take it in. It must be even that much more special and meaningful for him. And also, to the point, being a crown jewel event, such a huge, momentous occasion and an event for him to win, it all must be like one of his top moments and accomplishments in motorsports history.
I would say so. It would be great to talk to him and know for sure, but I imagine this Wally is positioned somewhere very special in his trophy case. I'm sure it is.
Oh, he must have at least this trophy at his home. I don't think he probably has a lot back at the house. But in the end, Petragon gets the victory, and he gets the final word as well because he gets a little smack talk on John Force.
You're throwing the gauntlet to John Force?
Well, there's been so much talk. I've heard so much about John Force. John Force says he's going to have to watch his McDonald's car for sure.
Slight smack talk. It's just Cruz showing a little personality, but it just shows that you got to have a bit of a rivalry, and you jar back and forth between the two drivers. But hey, it sells more tickets too for the next event.
Definitely does. And Cruz doesn't mind ruffling some feathers, and I like that. Cruz is outspoken. He'll tell you what he thinks. Here recently in NHRA drag racing, there has been a lot of pay cuts. Well, there's been pay cuts. There's been people laid off. The purse, what the drivers win in monetary means, it has been trimmed down. And that's been trimmed down due to COVID-19. They lost a sponsorship with Coke and Mellow Yellow. That became apparent. There's actually a lawsuit going on concerning that. They picked up now a new title series sponsor in Camping World. But when you look at the situation, you have a scenario that with Cruz, with NHRA drag racing, that he spoke up for them and said, hey, fans, fellow racers, remember what we're doing, remember why we're doing it. There's this video out there of him on his social media. And he basically says, hey, we haven't been racing for the purse for a very, very long time. This sport has become far more expensive than just racing for the purse. we've got to have people helping us do this.
We're going to go to the final category, the biggest category, top fuel. Now, in top fuel, one of the biggest names in the history of the category has to be Eddie Hill, a legend in his own right and in every right.
So, Eddie Hill is, legend, drag racing legend. And let me say, too, I think motorsports legend. At this time, he's one of the few individuals to do drag boat racing and asphalt drag racing in the Top Fuel Dragster. He is, at this time, I think still the fastest man in drag boat racing on water. And he is also the father of the fours. He was the first man to have a sub 5-second run in a top fueler, running a 498, I believe, in 1988 or 89 at the Texas Motorplex. So this man has accomplished a lot in drag racing, many wins, and he has had his ebbs and flows, though. There's been periods where he was the man to beat. And there's been periods people are saying, what is wrong with Eddie? And he's coming off of a time of people saying, where is Eddie? And he's here in 1995, really stepping towards the winding down of his career. And his career begins to wind down, and he kind of goes out in blazes of glory. You look over Eddie's Hill career, and especially from like 95 on to the end of his career, he has some of the worst engine explosions and accidents that you could have in top fuel drag racing.
Now, in this round, though, Eddie Hill, he's going to go up against the Bud King, Kenny Bernstein, who in 1995 still owned his NASCAR team. But that's enough about that. Get back to the drag race.
Kenny Bernstein hanging on that wheel for dear life, but he's got a perfect view of Eddie Hill's parachute as it comes out.
Hill, he's not over the hill just yet. Bernstein got off the line ahead of Hill, but unfortunately, he's not going to beat him to the line and get the win light. Hill will win, and he runs another low ET. That's good for lane choice, but he's just showing that he's got that pace and that Pennzoil top fueler.
He definitely does. And look, not John Force, Kenny Bernstein and Dale Armstrong. What a classic driver crew chief duo for so long. I mean, in funny car ranks, the fact of the matter is, if Kenny Bernstein would have stayed in the funny car ranks, we might not have seen quite the rise of John Force and Austin Coyle because of Dale Armstrong and Kenny Bernstein. And here is Kenny. What a exceptional Hall of Fame career. The first man to get over 300 miles per hour. But when you look at what he did in Top Fuel, there were times that it was up and down, up and down, up and down. I remember like one of his first years in Top Fuel, he had a problem with losing to, in particular, all the blonde women that were racing in the sport. He just couldn't get around the blondes for whatever reason. So Kenny has had a stellar career, but there's been periods in Top Fuel that even though people would put their money on him, should not have been the case. They should have been looking round by round in performance. There's been times where he's definitely been outperformed.
Next up in round 2, we have Corey Mclennan. Now, Corey Mack is driving the McDonald's top fueler for Coach Joe Gibbs. He's going to face off against the late, great Scott Coletta, man.
I'll tell you what, one of the badasses of the sport, honestly. He just had a flamboyance to him. Just one of those characters you love to watch drag race. And he's a champion in NHRA drag racing. He had early start in funny car, transitions to top fuel, has a championship in it. And he's later goes back to racing funny car after a brief hiatus. The best way I can sum up this period with Scott Coletta is for anyone watching, and maybe you're not familiar with this area, not familiar with what Scott was doing. Look at what Billy and Steve Torrance are doing right now. And that's kind of what Connie, Scott's dad, and Scott were doing. They were almost doing the Torrance thing, but right now. And the man loved drag racing. It's sad that we lost him the way in which he did, but he did go in a fashion, I think, that if he could choose, he would have went. And definitely one of the greats of the sport.
Corey Mack overpowers the racetrack. He tries to stay with it. Just billows of smoke off the tires. Scott Coletta trying to control the parachute snap.
And Coletta's going to get an easy victory moving on to the semifinals. And he's going to run another low ET, which is huge because that means he gets lane choice in the semis. And Corey Mack is eliminated.
Right. It's strange to think that Corey Mack doesn't have a championship, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
So many big wins. Huge wins.
So many big wins. So many big wins. So many streaks. And just never could quite get it all together and win that championship in NHRA professional drag racing.
Now, finally, in round 2, we have a driver that's from our top stories, Larry Dixon Jr. Not the second fastest qualifier, but he's going to face off against Shelly Anderson in her Western Auto Top Fueler.
Yeah, this time, Shelly Anderson. I was a Shelly Anderson fan. Loved me some Shelly Anderson. She just was... I just thought she was so cool. I loved her voice and kind of the golly shucks. She was kind of like that. I mean, it was just she was cute. It was I really liked Shelly, and she was tough though. She was tough. She had some bad accidents in her career, and she would get back in the car. I remember one time she actually had a broke rib or two, and she got back in the car strapped. I mean, can you imagine having some broke ribs and they pulling the straps on you in a car? I just can't imagine. I can't imagine.
Plus the shaking of that kind of car too, just rattling you, and you're strapped to it solid, and you can barely breathe, like you said, because you got a broke rib, and now you got these belts, and then that's too painful to think about.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. But she picked up the Western Auto sponsorship as well. Western Auto was definitely increasing its branding across motorsports. She had Jolly Rancher the year before, if I remember correctly, and just raced a partial schedule. But now they're looking full time here in this scenario. And I definitely was a Shelly Anderson fan.
Shelly, where's Larry? Shelly, Larry's in front of you.
Well, I mean, Anderson is no slouch. She actually got Larry Dixon on the tree, but Larry passes her at half track and will take the win light, claiming the victory for Dunn, and he'll get him into the semifinals with that Miller Genuine Draft Top Fueler. Anderson is eliminated, and that's a shame. But the kid's going on, and that's pretty good because we got a new star in the making here in Top Fuel. Now we go to the semifinals. Larry Dixon is set to go up against Scott Coletta. Now, it's crazy that these two are going to go head-to-head because this was actually exposed during the race. Connie Coletta helped out Don Perdone's team because of the incident that we mentioned in qualifying when the top of the blower, we would assume that piece of metal came flying back and almost hit Larry Dixon. It actually struck the wing of the car, and the team didn't have a backup wing or replacement parts. And actually, Connie's team lent them the necessary equipment to fabricate that wing to make sure everything was set and ready to go. Very ironic that everyone would help each other, would end up having to then face each other and go head to head and want to, defeat the other. But it's just that kind of camaraderie within the sport where you have to help each other get by round and round, even though you might face them in the next one.
It is. And I understand that in motorsports, you have a lot of that, but it seems to be heightened in drag racing, that you have crew to crew, team to team, helping one another, even in direct competition. So there is a lot of camaraderie. There is a lot of assistance one way or the other. And you might be asking, why is Larry Dixon in this predicament when, for a wing. Why wouldn't he have a spare wing? Well, remember, he had that crash in Bakersfield where the wing exploded and popped the tire, or the tire popped, and it took the wing out. So they were already on their spare wing. That's why they needed a backup wing from someone else.
Oh, and Dixon's dream goes up in tire smoke. Scott Coletta. Ooh, boy, what a nice one.
Give that victory to Scott Coletta and the Connie Coletta-led team. Another low ET. What a run. In fact, let's hear from Scott at the far end.
You went right up there and staged. Put both lights on. Dixon couldn't ask for more than that. He could take his time.
That's for sure. You know, I mean, I knew he was going to take his time. I've been watching him, and I don't think he's doing it on purpose. He's just being careful. So, you know, go run the race.
Scott was just a great character. We need Scotts in drag racing. We need Scotts in all different types of motorsports. You know, maybe for people who aren't familiar with Scott Coletta, maybe the best way to put it to someone modern today, Clint Boyer. I would think that'd be kind of like, he would be kind of like the Clint Boyer of NHRA drag racing, I think. And though a little bit more success than Clint has had racing, but it doesn't shock me that Scott performed and is doing so well. He's got a legendary driver turned tuner wrenching on the car, Dick LaHaye, which is a champion in his own right. And later on will actually be paired up with, guess who? Larry Dixon, and take Dixon to a lot of his championships. Dick LaHaye, master tuner and driver, the Michigander in NHRA drag racing.
Oh, and as you mentioned, Larry Dixon, he's eliminated for the day. But you know what? That's a pretty successful debut to come in, get up through to the semifinals, though he got defeated. I mean, Don Snake Perdome seems pretty happy with his driver's debut as well.
Look, after the wild crash in Bakersfield in testing, bringing out a old car, backup car, you have the issues in qualifying. You got to go borrow another wing to go to the semifinals. Not a bad day at all.
Eddie Hill, he's still running. In fact, he is going to be in the semifinals, and he's up against Mike Dunn in a very festive looking La Victoria Salsa top fueler for Daryl Gwynn.
Yes, Daryl Gwynn, what a story there. He would have been like the next Don Garlitz. You know, he would have been the next phenom. He already was beginning that way. He would have had the Hall of Fame career. We probably would not be talking so much about Kenny Bernstein in Top Fuel, and we wouldn't be talking about Snake's end in Top Fuel, and there might not be Scott Coletta's success in Top Fuel if Daryl Gwynn did not have that crash over in England at Santa Pod that caused him to be paralyzed still to this day. But he has not let that deter him. He was a owner in NHRA drag racing, successful owner in NHRA drag racing, and he is doing so much now through his foundation and what he does in drag racing and for so many other people. He hasn't let tragedy take his life down a direction he didn't want it to go. He has stayed and remained positive. I've talked to Daryl briefly before and have met him, and he is an amazingly positive guy and an individual that has an amazing outlook on life, even though he's been through what he has been through. And yes, he does have a good driver in Mike Dunn. Mike Dunn obviously is more well known probably to many people who are going to view this for being in the broadcast booth. But we're talking about a dude who's won the U.S. Nationals in funny car. He's won in Top Fuel Dragster. He has already had by this time an accomplished career, and he's the son of a legend in Jim Dunn, who is still out there today as a car owner in Jim Dunn Racing. So Mike Dunn, yeah, he's the real deal, man.
Oh, yeah. Anytime you're facing up against Mike Dunn, you know it's going to be a tough race. If that car is going to go down the track, he's going to give you a run for your money.
Trying to rectify that. It is Eddie Hill to his first ever Winter Nationals final round.
Dead heat from the starting line, and Eddie Hill is able to just nip Mike Dunn by half a car length at the line. What a race. And also just a beautiful race too, because you had these two very vibrant looking cars flying down the track. Just gorgeous, gorgeous race.
Definitely, you got to love it when you have this close of a drag race with great looking cars as they were. And, what I love about it is you could see Mike was ahead a little bit, and then Eddie comes around. You got some back and forth. I love that in drag racing when you get a little back and forth in a run.
Now, the main event, top fuel final. Scott Coletta, he's going to have lane choice. He had the lowest ET. And you know what? He's going to use that lane choice to his psychological advantage. He's going to put Eddie Hill into the far lane.
Mind games comes into drag racing, definitely. And I think maybe more so than probably any other motorsport because, drag racing, when you have a 16 car field, it's really 4 races in one to crown a overall champion. If you race all day, you're racing 4 small races in one big race. And you're racing Imano. You're not racing the entire field per race. You're racing one person, one car. And that avails to one mind versus another mind playing with each other. And it might have been a case here. Hey, we've seen Eddie over there all day. They've been running good, but we believe we can run good in any lane. We're going to take that lane away from him. Maybe we affect the old man. You never know. People in drag racing definitely think that way.
Scott Coletta has lost traction. There's no recovering from that. And Eddie Hill has won his first race in over a year and a half.
Right from the start, Coletta is up in smoke. The lane choice might have backfired on him there. And Hill's going to cruise down the track, get the win light, and his first ever Winter Nationals title. What a victory for Eddie Hill. I really think that mind game might have backfired on Coletta there. I just think back to his race before with Larry Dixon Jr. Dixon Jr. in the same lane, kind of same exact spot, same exact outcome, just going up in smoke there.
Right. And, at this point, you kind of have to wonder, was something up with the right lane? Was something going on? And drivers will contemplate that all the time. But for whatever reason, Dick LaHaye decided, hey, we're going to put you in this lane. I think you're going to be able to make it. It didn't work out. And Eddie Hill wins fair and square. Strange to see Scott, though, go up in smoke and not win this Winter Nationals event. If you were putting money on this, if you were looking at this matchup, you were probably going to go with Scott Coletta over Eddie Hill here in the finals. But Eddie wins it, and Eddie marks off another milestone on a great Hall of Fame career, getting his first Winter Nationals event win in Pomona. And I don't know, strange to think that he hadn't won one until right now.
This time he gets to claim the Wally at Pomona for the first event of the 1995 NHRA season. That was a really great event. I always love that about NHRA racing too. You start kind of, late morning, first couple rounds go by, but right when it's coming down to finals time, it's kind of like twilight. You get a little bit of that dusk look with the sky. And then when especially those nitro cars run down the track, those headers light up the sky when they're on a good pass.
Man, look, there is nothing like nitromethane drag racing under some form of dusk or light or nighttime. It's the most impressive show in motorsports, period. Because it's all natural. It's not fabricated. You don't need glow sticks under the car, whether you're for that or not. You don't need any of that. It's just the car doing its things and throwing out fumes in the atmosphere, and they are absolutely beautiful when all the candlesticks are lit and you've got 2 drag cars going down the drag strip. Absolutely beautiful. And yes, to your point, everybody likes to say like, well, why isn't there a better TV package for drag racing? Or why don't we see this or see that? Just in this, why did they pick up a round 2? Why didn't we have round 1? Well, I don't think most people don't realize that there's more at a drag race racing than just the professional categories. You have sportsman classes, which are in fact professionals. They're professional hobbyists, you could say, possibly, but they're just as serious about drag racing as people in Top Fuel, Funny Car, pro stock motorcycle. And you can have, from 8 to 15 to possibly even more classes at a national event competing for a national event NHRA Wally. So, yeah, you can't cover it all day because it does start at 11 a.m. and ends at like 4 or 5 o'clock. It's a long day for sure. And it's more than just Top Fuel, and it's more than just Funny Car and Pro Stock. But yes, it is neat when it works out and they're racing in the golden hour for the win. It puts emphasis on these two competitors who have made it all day to this very moment to be crowned a champion.
Oh, and it makes that battle even more prevalent because you get to see, here's them in round one, and then here's them in the finals, and the timing looks totally different, and it shows how long and arduous their days were, because even for the teams after that round win, they're going back and thrashing and working hard to make sure that they can get that car right back to the line for the next round. And those round periods get shorter and shorter between round one to round two to the semis and then the finals. So, it gets more difficult as the day goes on too.
It does. That time does seem to decrease. And, even to this day, as professional as many of the teams are, you will find teams thrashing and like the car is rolling into the lanes and they're still buttoning up a valve cover, before they get out there and run the final round. It's tough. It's tough out there for the crew guys.
It's a tough one. It's not tough for us though, because we got to enjoy this from the comforts of our computers. A beautiful race. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed that it was uploaded. Thanks to whoever uploads, because all the time the uploaded content that is on the internet, these people are doing God's work almost, kind of, in a sense, because this content, it doesn't get archived anywhere else other than YouTube. So it's great that it is archived. It lives on. People can go and view it, engage it, get a perspective of that time period. And I think we did a good job, especially you, Lee. You did bring amazing perspectives and understanding of not only this time period in the NHRA in 1995, but also a lot of different points too, from the history of like where things started to kind of how it transitions to current day and how it all linked together. Is really great.
Well, man, I thank you for the opportunity to be on and flashback to this particular race. And look, great. I was an Eddie Hill fan. Great to see him win again. And yeah, it's striking though, when you look at the points leaders from this event, hardly any of them are drag racing still. And there are a few names, notably Scott Coletta, that are no longer with us. So it's amazing what can happen in 30 years and how the landscape of a motorsport can change. Eddie Hill's not driving anymore. Larry Dixon is probably going to be back in the car in a NHRA capacity, rumors next year, but he's had a hiatus from that for a while due to some licensing issues and the business venture, which he went out with of the two-seater Top Fuel dragster that he's been promoting. Scott Coletta, he's obviously gone. Jim Yates is still out there in the pits. He's tuning and wrenching, but not driving. Yeah, when you look, Warren Johnson, he's not out there. Rusty Glidden, like I've said, that was kind of odd and strange. He's not racing out there. Bob is no longer with us. So, I'm looking at it right now, and Steve is hugging Ernie and Ursi Heel. Steve is no longer with us. Steve Evans. It's amazing to see how things can change in 30 years. And really, I think it brings into focus, go back to the first race this year and say who left their top 5 in points. And you kind of project forward and you say who will still be drag racing in 30 years to come. and who's the names that we are going to be looking at. When they left Pomona, Doug Coletta was high on the list. I doubt Doug Coletta will be racing in 30 years, though he's one of the greats in drag racing. But we may very well still have like a Justin Ashley racing, and he might be the next Doug Coletta of his era. So it's interesting to see in this very moment the rise and the falls of such like a Larry Dixon, and you see the twilight setting of careers in like Eddie Hill. That's why we need to take these looks back into motorsports. They can help us look into the future and help us see where it's going, and hopefully we don't make the same mistakes that were made in the past.
What an event. I hope you all enjoyed looking back at the 1995 NHRA Winternationals from Pomona Raceway in Pomona, California. I really enjoyed my conversation with Monday Morning Racer. Make sure to go follow him on YouTube, check out his Twitter, and if you see him at a drag strip near you or wherever you are around the country, be sure to say hi to him because he's a really rad dude. Hopefully we can talk again in the future, Lee. Really enjoyed our conversation. As always, Flashback to the Track is presented by Blue Emu. Soothe tired muscles and joints with maximum strength. Blue Emu. Works fast and you won't stink. We'll be back next week with another episode. For right now, I'm James signing off. Mark, we'll see you soon, buddy.